have a great interview lined up for a little later, just a little bit. Eugene Puryear of the show By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik is going to be joining me in a little bit. I'm very excited. You know, I've talked a lot about, you know, I believe that people should know what the options are out there. And Eugene is going to come and talk to us about some of those options and some of the stuff that he's working on. Very exciting.
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. This is pretty cool. We're getting you up. Yeah, we're getting you up. We're getting you up on the screen now. But so Eugene actually had me on recording an episode earlier on By Any Means Necessary over at Radio Sputnik, and now here you are joining me. So thank you.
No, I know. No, thank you so much. And tomorrow, starting at 12 o'clock tonight, people will be able to listen to it.
Okay, very cool. We had a very, very exciting conversation, which, as you just heard, will be available starting at midnight. Basically about the black youth, the black millennial vote, and some of the strategies taken by the Clinton campaign, maybe in addressing that voting bloc, our voting bloc, instead of, you know, in favor of maybe more going for moderate Republicans. I mean, the conversation involved is really great. You definitely need to check it out. Check out By Any Means Necessary on Facebook. Are you on Twitter too?
We are on Twitter. We're on Facebook. BAM Necessary. So the last N of By Any Means Necessary acronym. So BAMN Necessary. And then we're also on SputnikNews.com, iTunes, and Spreaker. You can just Google By Any Means Necessary with Eugene Puryear. It'll be pretty easy to find. It's
definitely another show to add to your roster if you haven't already heard it. When I got approached to be on it, and then I was listening, I was like, oh my God, who is this dude? Because I got to add him to my life. But I want to chop it up a little bit just to talk about maybe more like having our Black progressive voices, you know, building out this. I mean, we talk about movements and stuff. Almost this generation of Black progressive voices in itself is a movement, right? Like having this perspective, having this viewpoint, get out there. It was really exciting because I feel like sometimes I live in a box. And so when I was listening to you talk, I'm like, wow, I'm not alone.
No, I hear you. I think it's a good point. I mean, I think that a lot of times we underplay as Black people the impact of COINTELPRO, and I think the co-option that existed at that time that really kind of severed the head of radical Black political thought. You know, not in just terms of people going to prison, but also people changing their political views. And that really, at the end of the day, you know, maybe more so than other communities, I think the Black community is really starting to find a new generation's voice that's really, you know, criticizing systemically what we have here in America. It's exciting.
It is exciting. And so just kind of getting into you a little bit, because you host By Any Means Necessary, but you were also kind of engaged politically, right?
Yeah, just a touch. Just a
little bit.
I am indeed the vice presidential candidate of the Party for Socialism and Liberation here in 2016.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and then we can talk a little bit more about the campaign, et cetera.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we've been around for about 12 years, since 2004. And I would say, you know, the PSO, we're really just a collection of organizers and activists all around the country, you know, really, you know, all regions, whatever. And really, if you look at the things we do, I mean, most people are just everyday people, but we're involved in all the sort of same progressive struggles, you would see probably anyone watching this show involved in. So certainly, I think that's maybe a little bit of our profile. I think what brings us together as an organization is a commitment to the idea that, you know, the range of problems that exist in our society are really deep. I mean, we're sort of as radical as reality itself is the way we like to look at it. They're really significant. And if we're really going to talk about how do we solve them, not how do we just make them not a little bit worse, we have to start talking about changing the system from capitalism to something else, to socialism, a system that puts people's needs first. So that's what we're doing. And to some degree, that's the message that we're bringing to the election. But I think we're also trying to build a perspective of movement building as well.
Excellent. And how do you see the challenge of movement building within an electoral political process?
I mean, I think it's tricky, and I think that a lot of it depends on sort of what you want to do. I mean, I think the type of campaign that we're running is a recognition of I mean, I'll just give you one quick fact. I mean, if you look at the economy, for example, and there's all these celebrations when like 250,000 jobs get created in a month. But if you look at the employment to population ratio, if you wanted to create enough jobs for just black males over 20 to have 100% employment, you'd have to create something like 800 some thousand jobs. So, I mean, to have 100% employment, you'd have to create millions and millions of jobs, yet they create 250,000 and say, oh, hey, the economy, it's on a comeback trail. So, I think for us, it's like bringing the reality of that and then looking at totally having to reorganize the way that we produce things, the way that we consume things, and the way that we relate to each other. And I think that type of campaign, movement building is very effective, because I think what we're reaching out to and what we're looking for are people who are looking at the elections because they think, hey, I can make some change here, but are also looking more deeply, okay, how do we solve problems beyond elections? I think beyond that, there are challenges. I mean, I've also run for city council in Washington, D.C. And in that case, we ran a different type of campaign where we united sort of a broad range of progressives, from some people who were Democrats to, hard left socialists. We even had, a handful of anarchists in there backing us. So, we had a really broad progressive coalition of everyone you could kind of think of. And in that context, it can be a little bit different because, you're united around some significant goals, a handful of goals you'd want to see the city pursue. But beyond that, building enthusiasm around that, you're still also thinking about how to build organizations that are durable and can try to make the type of change you need. So I think movement building can happen through electoral campaigns, but at the end of the day, really the unity and the sinew of sort of progressive movements has to be in the streets.
Deep. I love it.
Thank you.
I was just thinking back to one part of what you were just saying about when you were saying, like, movement building has to be in the streets. And I've seen pictures of Gloria protesting, like, on the front lines. I know people get really excited when they still Jill Stein show places, but I've seen so many pictures of Monica Moorhead and Gloria as well out there on the front lines, like in so many different places across the country, actually building and working with activists, there's almost a synergy, it seems like, between the work with PSL and various different activist organizations and initiatives, like whether it was the RNC, DNC. Like, I've seen so much going on that you don't necessarily see in a traditional election cycle, whether it's a concern about, I don't want to offend my donor base or whatever it is, but there does seem to be more of a focus, not so much on can we get to whatever magical percentage to get on the stage versus can we actually build the conversation and the movement in relation with the people.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good point. And it's one of the things I've known Gloria for really about that whole 12 years. And she always finds a way to find her way to the tip of the spear there. I remember she and I being in Gina, Louisiana in 2007. But no, I think that's exactly it. I mean, I think that there's different ways you have to look at the election. And I think the way that we look at ourselves, right? I mean, I think that obviously a lot of people are, going to vote against Donald Trump, probably vote for Hillary Clinton because they think that we got to keep this guy out. I think we are making an argument about why that's not the most effective way. Hopefully a lot of people will see it, but I mean, I think let's just be realistic. I think that for people though who are looking are already engaged, activists, organizers, just people who are doing none of that, but are sitting at home thinking like, man, something really serious has got to change. Right. Then I think you have to start to look at, what the role of an election campaign really can be for progressives. Where's change really going to come? And if we're going to, exert our limited energies, are we really going to try to reach people with sort of the message we know can actually solve the problem to try to build the core of a movement that won't sell out, of a movement that's going to not be compromised ideologically, of a movement that's sort of welded together over the long haul for the struggle against, what are very serious opponents? I mean, do we want to strengthen that movement? Or what? I mean, what are we really trying to accomplish? And so I think that, from our perspective, we're not really necessarily out here competing with the other third-party candidates from that perspective. I think there's a lot of value to what Jill Stein and the Greens are bringing. But I think what we're bringing is sort of the perspective we have in movements about where we need to go into the electoral space to try to draw some folks who are looking at elections as the most important thing to do into this broader process of building a core, that's radical and, quite frankly, revolutionary, because that's what we're talking about if we're saying getting rid of capitalism.
Radical and revolutionary. All right. Like, it definitely seems to be. No, that's I just lost my train of thought. But no.
It's okay.
No. But because I'm just like, wow. No, but definitely, I think the movement building aspect, I do think that, because especially with this electoral cycle, right, we see so many people, particularly those who came out of the quote unquote Bernie Sanders movement, we see so many people who do have that excitement and energy, and they're not willing to put it behind Secretary Clinton. They're just, for whatever for fundamental issues of whether it's fairness, what they perceive as fairness, or, just a moral, a moral and personal mandate, whatever it is, they just can't get behind. But there are these issues that people care about that they're willing to work and get behind. So how do we engage those people? What do you as vice president say to folks? I mean, in your day-to-day work and activism, to really kind of get people to learn more about the organization and the platform, and more of what you're describing as movement building?
I mean, I think we just try to talk about what's going on every day. I mean, I think some places that we get invited, especially third-party candidates, you get invited by political groups that are already sort of engaged in things, college students and people like that, where I think the discussion is very heavily based around, how do they get more involved politically, both in elections and outside of elections. I think that, from the point of view of people who are out in the streets, I think our attitude is just to go and to listen. I mean, I think if folks go to votepsl.org, you can see a recent article from a local newspaper in California, and Gloria was out there, and that was sort of one of the quotes they picked out from people, like, it's rare to find a presidential candidate who listens. We want to know, what people are going through in the places we go. We're not getting on the mass media because we're shut out of that. We don't get in the debate stages because we're shut out of that. The ballot access laws are so draconian, but what you can do is get out and just talk to people face to face about what's going on, and then bring the knowledge that we have as people who are engaged in activists and organizers, both Gloria and I, and other members of the PSL and our supporters who are supporting this campaign, and say, like, hey, well, you can definitely vote for us, but beyond that, there's organizations and individuals you can work with to actually, keep working 365 on these problems and on these issues. And that's what we're trying to stress to people, is, like, at the end of the day, we're in the elections to say the elections are not really an effective vehicle for change. They're a vehicle for, I think, limited reform, but I mean, look at what we're fighting for now: labor rights, civil rights, women's rights. I thought we already won those.
Exactly. 50 to however many years ago, right? Women's rights. I mean, it's been almost 100 years since women's suffrage passed. We've had 51 years since the VRA. I mean, no, exactly, definitely. It does seem like in so many ways, and I've said this several times, and I got my head bit off by an older Hillary supporter, but it feels like so many times that we're relitigating battles that our parents' generation and grandparents' generation had allegedly already won. And one of the things I do see is that they're, like you were just saying, like, the electoral process is a very limited means of achieving meaningful, not just legislative, but meaningful real change, right? We're talking about sustainable change. Not change that lasts for like 3 years until, a new fad comes along. But real sustainable change and engagement. I mean, I want my kids to be fighting a different battle, right? I don't want them to be fighting this battle, but dressed up differently. I want them to be working on something completely different than this. I would like for this to be set. Like, can we settle this and move on to some other work down the line? But I like what you're saying in terms of just helping to engage people, on the issues, but then also talking and listening, because that seems to be something that's really lost in a lot of ways. Like, everyone seems to want to, people who are running for office, right, always want to seem to tell you about what's so great about them or what's so bad about their opponent, and very few genuinely listen. And from following you and from following Lori, it just seems like with PSL, there's a genuine attempt to listen and to engage. Not the focus, like I said, it's not the focus on getting to this, proving that I'm worthy to be on that stage. I mean, we know it's messed up. We know that the third parties get blocked out of the debate stage. We know that, like you said, that the ballot access laws are draconian. We know these things, and unfortunately, they're not going to change in this election cycle. So what else do you do? And I like what you're saying about engaging and reaching out to other people. So where are you guys in terms of, even though I just said ballot access is important, but how can people vote for you? Like, where are you? Where are you on the ballot? Write-ins,
Yeah.
whole,
Well, you
or is
can
that
you can
not
see
really?
you can see the whole list. No. We can definitely
Okay.
say you can see the whole list at votepsl.org. We got some good ones. I apologize.
Oh, no, you're
I
fine.
set an alarm for something that's not even happening anymore. But either way, one thing we're very excited about. We got the Peace and Freedom nomination in California. A historic party. Eldridge Cleaver ran on that party in 1968. One thing I will say too, though, that's also exciting. California has terrible draconian ballot access laws, so I can't even appear on the ballot, or they would try to take the Peace and Freedom nomination. But the Native American activist legend Dennis Banks has stepped in California to be Gloria's vice presidential for the Peace and Freedom, and also in a couple other states like New Mexico, Colorado, where we're on the ballot, where there's similar sort of restrictions. We're on Iowa, New Jersey, Vermont, where we also have the nomination of the Liberty Union Party, Florida, and we're still seeking ballot access in other states, Louisiana, I believe. And so, yeah, votepsl.org, you can see it all. We're also pursuing official write-in status in some states where, they'll actually, well, they say, they'll actually count the votes. So you can actually write in, which is kind of crazy that, like, people write in so many people to vote, but they don't even really bother to count them mostly, which, I don't know, says something about, I don't know, it's just another thing we know about ballot access, but I've always thought that's interesting. You basically got to, I don't know, either way. So you can see us, votepsl.org. We are out there, and I think that we're looking to dialogue and just build with folks and hopefully carry it just beyond November 6th. I mean, I think that we are going to show, though, that there is a larger appetite, I think, for revolutionary type ideas than maybe some people would think. And I hope we also build some bridges along the way with other folks that are looking for progressive change, so that we can get something here in the next few years.
Definitely. I think that when we talk about revolutionary change, because again, revolution has been like the new, Bernie Sanders came on the scene last year. Revolution was the new political buzzword. And one thing my mother said was that not everybody's revolution is the same. Not everyone has the same idea of what revolution means. And definitely supported Bernie Sanders, still support Bernie Sanders in spirit. But what has turned out to be revolution for him has raised a lot of eyebrows for many people who were definitely about revolutionary politics. There's also some finger pointing like, see, I told you so. But I mean, but that's a whole other story. That's a whole other conversation. But what you were saying, I think, in terms about engaging people on revolutionary issues, we've already seen that there are so many people nationwide that are ready for a change, and people are able to clarify what that change is. One of the biggest mistakes I think people made 2008 coming out of the Bush years was we said we wanted a change, but we're not maybe as specific. And Barack Obama was definitely a change, and the hope and change, it all sounded really good, but clearly we didn't mean the same thing.
Right at the time.
No. So, we got caught up with the emotionalism, and yes, thank you, deliver us from this person over here. And I think over the last 8 years, voters have really learned more about how to engage in the process and to clarify and specify what they mean when they're saying we want change to happen, right? Yeah. We want change to happen, but we don't necessarily want that change to be Donald Trump, but there are other alternatives. So what do you say to people, though, when they say to you, well, as a third party, you're just ensuring Donald Trump, particularly with the poll numbers that have come out, what is your response in that instance?
Well, I would say there's a couple responses. I mean, the vast majority of studies that get done on third-party candidates do show that most people who vote for people who are not two major parties would not have voted. So, I mean, that's just one aspect. I mean, two, also, whose responsibility is it to get votes? I mean, I think every candidate has to try to earn as many votes as they can possibly get. And if you didn't get someone's vote, I mean, you can feel they should have voted for you. Hey, I could feel you should have voted for me and maybe you didn't, but if I didn't convince you, then I guess ultimately that's on me. I mean, you can't just expect people to just do something when they have what kind of political culture does that breed when it's like, regardless of trust or faith or anything, just blindly do something just to be doing it? I don't think that's what it's about. So that's the number one thing I say. But then the other thing I say is I think we also have to look at, I think it's a partial logical fallacy. I mean, if you look at what's happening in this country and the rising tide of the far right, which I will agree is very worrisome, without a doubt. Right. I mean, is it really going to be stopped by Hillary Clinton and liberal Democrats? I mean, I just think that there's a range of issues that we have to ask ourselves, even from the quote unquote alt-right, that if you look at what they're saying, look more at Donald Trump as kind of like a useful idiot. He's mainstreaming ideas that regardless of who wins, they plan to be able to get more purchase hold, just like they did against Obama because he was black. They emerged without any Donald Trump, and they're going to use patriarchy against Hillary Clinton to drive the same sort of angry sentiment and grow, I think, regardless. So one, what kind of group and organization and movement do you need to build to face against these people, these Breitbart people who are serious? And then I think two, I mean, we just have to ask ourselves, like, I mean, you have the climate crisis, which is not like on an unlimited time scale, which I think is huge. But I mean, just the instability and unsustainability of the way we live, the poverty that exists. I mean, you know, how can you live in a country that has more empty dwellings than homeless people, yet you have homeless people everywhere? I mean, I think that the reality of it is that, like, housing is everything that is produced in our society. Every single thing is produced to be sold. If it serves a need, that's incidental. And I mean, I think that's what we mean when we say revolution. If everything right now is right now produced to make a profit, we think everything should be centered around what people needs on the basis of the resources we have and what people are able to do. And I think that's a big radical shift, and that's beyond elections. And that's kind of the message we want to bring, is like, we got to get real here. I mean, if we need to cut climate change, give people a decent standard of living, and do it basically right now with how they're suffering, those are big changes.
Those are huge changes, but you're definitely right. That's not something that's going to be cured or fixed during the electoral process. Most of the things on the table right now that we actually need a resolution to are not going to be fixed through voting for president in this November election. I mean, whether it's, you know, making sure police stop killing unarmed Black and Latino people, for example, right? Like those are there's so many different moving pieces in there that are not going to be resolved by electing Secretary Clinton as president. I mean, maybe she'll. Right. I mean, even if you listen to her statements on the subject, it's a hodgepodge. So climate change, it's great. The U.S. and China signed the Paris Accord today. Okay, yay. What's that actually going to mean? Right. At the same time, we have, you know, the fight happening in North Dakota with yet another pipeline to be built, right? And more, you know, spewing of chemicals across the country. So I mean, and it's oil in this case, but still crude oil. But we have these conversations. On the one hand, we're like, see, look, we need to do this because this is going to make things better. But then you still have ongoing, whether it's bad habits or actions or other procedures, you know, like the process that's going on with the Dakota Access Pipeline. There's so much going on that's contradictory. So it's you know, people act as if one will cancel out the other somehow and make everything all right, and it doesn't. And we do need to stay active and engaged beyond just November, beyond this election cycle, and not just for midterm election voting either, but to actually, like, the actual change that happens. Even when you look back through history, right? When we just talked about the civil rights movement, women's rights movement, that happened not because some legislators got together and decided they wanted to pass a law. That happened because people took to the streets, people organized, people who were engaged constantly to make it happen.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, and that's like, I mean, our message to people is pretty simple. I mean, if you think what we're saying is true and that the problems we reach can only be solved by reaching socialism, then definitely vote for us. But I mean, what we're really excited about, I think, is that there's a new radicalization inside of this country. And so whatever you do November 6th, I mean, we're just urging folks, like, you know, we're saying, hey, we'll see you in the streets, you know, November 7th or whatever it may be, because at the end of the day, I think you're right. I mean, we honestly, elections have to come to the point if we're having a truly effective movement where that's just one instrument in a whole range of tactics that's laid out strategically as part of a broader plan. But we're only going to get there not by, like, people just dictating to each other, but I think actually getting together and fighting with each other. So, I mean, you know, we believe very strongly that, you know, socialism is what we need, that we have to get rid of capitalism, and that we have to really build strong, united organizations that can do that. But, you know, I think there's millions of people who are going to be voting for Hillary, voting for Jill Stein, and maybe staying at home, that I think we all hate a lot of the same things. So let's just stay as united as we can around that.
Ah, great. I appreciate that. Can you tell he's a host, guys? He knows how to do some closing. No, I appreciate that so much. Thank you so much for stopping by and chatting with me for a while. Definitely, everybody, what's the website again?
You go to votepsl.org.
Votepsl.org.
And then for By Any Means Necessary, just Google By Any Means Necessary with Eugene Puryear.
Okay. And I'll tweet out those links again after I'm done. But thank you so much,
Fantastic.
Eugene. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fantastic.
Awesome. Good night.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye. Yay, that was Eugene. See, I told you options. And there's a lot to be said about this, right? Because a lot of us want to know what happens next. Where do we go? Okay, we elect people on November 7th, November 8th. I gotta look at a calendar. But then what? And there are people, there are actions, there are organizations out there that are engaging and mobilizing and working and building with people on local levels to make those moves going further. So definitely check them out, votepsl.org or vote PSL on Twitter, PSL. I think it's PSL on Twitter, vote PSL on Twitter, and I'll tweet out more about Eugene and definitely check out Eugene's show by any means necessary.